Welcome. I'm Dr. Jesse Morse, a family and sports medicine physician in Miami that specializes in regenerative medicine as well as anti-aging. Today, we're going to talk about anti-aging. We're going to talk about the fact that there's an amazing test that can actually tell you how old your body is from a blood sample, from an analysis of your DNA, from an analysis of your inflammation, and tell you how strong or weak your immune system is. Many different things, subcategories that can give us more information than we presently have. The fascinating thing about this part is it's really evolved over the past 10 or 15 years. If you haven't been here before, I am a physician that loves to discuss different types of topics that maybe you haven't heard about before, or trying to shed a different light on them. Sometimes there are different injuries to the body, as I do predominantly practice sports medicine, but I have a fascination for anti-aging and longevity medicine, do a lot of different anti-aging protocols, and that's where some of this stuff will come from. This specific test we're going to talk about today is one of my favorite tests. It's called TruDiagnostics. It is a Harvard-based, partnered test, and it really encompasses a lot of cool different things that you can't really get in many other different types of longevity or aging tests. In my opinion, this is the most accurate and sensitive one that we have to date, and it's the most current one. I'm going to show you this page right here that you can see. The first methylation DNA based test came out in about 2011. And then, the year after, there was a little bit more evolution. And then a couple years later, the Horvath clock came out, which, has become pretty famous. A couple years after that, in 2016, you had the second generation aging clock that they call the mitotic cell division, or the Epitalk. And then over the next couple of years, they added a couple pieces to it. And then in 2020, the third generation anti-aging clocks came out with the Dunedin Pro-Am. And that's something that I'll talk about in a little bit. And then they upgraded that to the Pace. And then finally, the past 2 years or 3 years, so the methylation scores, and they really started to get more detailed. They used a huge data bank of over 50 years of data to kind of compile and give us the best idea of what the blood correlates to aging, to healthy, to risk. Now, this specific test is called an OMIC, O-M-I-C-M. Age is the first clock that's actually trained with proteomic, metabolomic, and clinical measures created. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the specifics, but there's some really cool parts to this that I really like. There's essentially 6 parts to this, and they all have to do with chromosome. The first part is the gene and genomics. Then the second part is what we call epigenomics. And there's a kind of a fascination. Most people think that our genes correlate with how we're going to end up, how long we're going to live with diseases. But we've realized that our genes really only code for about 30% of that. It's really the remaining 70% is epigenetics, meaning what you drink, what you eat, if you exercise, what your toxins are. Do you smoke? Do you drink alcohol? Where you live? Some of the different things that we put our body into, those are the epigenetics, and those are really even more important than the genetics. Then we also have the transcriptomics and how kind of the genes turn into this type of actionable RNA. We have proteomics, which is basically how proteins function, very important. And then we have metabolomics and how the different chemical processes produced by protein interactions and how that kind of affects our tissue and our body. And then finally, phenomics, which is the study of observable traits such as eye, skin, and hair color, and then how that can change and coordinate and impact our biology. So the second section, the one that, when you get this test, what is the most important number? And in my opinion, there's many different parts to this. I've done this one. I'm about to do another one. And yes, it gives you an ohmic age number. And this is supposed to be the most sensitive number. And in the sample I'm going to show you, I forgot it's somewhere in the 40s. I think it's 47. And it basically gives you kind of a cumulative number of all different things. And it says, hey, are you higher or lower than your age? Are you older than your said age, or are you younger than your age? Ideally, you'd probably want to be younger. And it will kind of tell you, what age range you're in terms of percentile. And it says, your calendar age is 40, but your, biological age is 45 or whatever it says. And it gives you very specific things, and then it breaks it down as to why it gave you that information. Now, but when you kind of peel back the layer, this second piece is actually kind of fascinating. So if you look at what I call the risk of disease, it really breaks down each of these disease processes. So it will give you a relative risk score. And it basically says you are 15% or whatever the number is higher or lower than other people your age. And then it says if you lowered your age by 1 year, how would that change? If you increased your year or it got worse by 1 age, how would that number change? So the sample I have in front of me, it says the relative risk score is 15% for death. If I were to increase that number or make it worse, it would be 32% just by increasing 1 year, or by increasing it 3 years, it would increase 73% risk of death, which is pretty crazy. If I improve it by 1 year, it only drops 1%. If I improve it by 3 years, it drops 23%. So that's a significant number. Now, it does that for many, many different categories. You have cancer, you have stroke, you have heart disease, type 2 diabetes, COPD, which is a lung condition, and depression. Now, many of these are common diseases that many of us are going to get. Heart disease. Unfortunately, type 2 diabetes is very prevalent right now. Depression is relatively prevalent. And most people will unfortunately get some type of cancer sooner than later. So these are different things that you can kind of gauge. How healthy am I? What age is my body think it is versus what I have on my birth certificate per se. Now the second, the next part, we'll call it the third part for that matter, is there's a couple epigenetic biomarkers. I won't talk about those. And they really broke down some of the individual parameters of your blood. How does this liver enzyme correlate with this, and how does your cholesterol correlate with this, and stuff like that. So it kind of gives you a deep dive into that. And I won't bore you with that stuff. The next section that I kind of want to talk about is one that I find really fascinating, because it's not one that you can find really any other place except for this test. And that is called the Dunedin pacing test. Let me find it. I think it's on this page. Yeah. So it looks like this. And this is a really cool test. This is one of my favorite tests. So this tells you how quickly or slowly are you aging. Now, the fastest is technically 0.6, and the slowest is 1.4. So what does that mean? So it says if the number was 1, then for every year you get older, your body is getting a year older. That's good. Now, if you were ideal 0.6, meaning for every year you get older, your body only really gets 60% older. So you really have a birthday every year and a half, as opposed to a year. Now, if it's 1.4, which is the worst case scenario, that means you're aging 140% faster. That means every 6 months or so, you actually have a birthday. So this is something that you can track over time, and that's what I'm about to do. I'm about to take the second round of this to see how the changes that I've implemented have improved. Now, I was pretty happy with my score. It was a little bit over 0.8. I'm working on getting it closer to 0.7 and then eventually 0.6. The lowest data we have is 0.48, which is pretty incredible. And you really want to strive to be under 1, meaning obviously every age you get older, you don't quite get that old and your body is pretty healthy. Now, there's a fascinating facial chart on here that kind of shows you what it looks like if you're a slow aging person versus a fast aging person. And you've seen that. You have people that look like, who are 40 that look like they're 60. And then you have people that are 50 that look like they're 30. And you're trying to figure out, like, how old really are you? And there's many different factors to that. Some of it's genetics. Most of it is epigenetics. Did you smoke? Did you drink? Did you exercise? Did you take care of yourself? What other diseases did you have? How well did you sleep? So there's a lot of different variables here. Now, the next test is actually a pretty cool test. When I saw this, I was like, wow, I never really thought of that. But you can actually check to see how old your immune system is. And it does this by checking a CD4 to CD8 ratio, which is a complicated way of saying how healthy the different cells of my immune system are. And it basically says, these are the cells that put up a frontline defense. These are my antibodies. These are what we call natural killer cells. These are memory T4 cells. And all these different types of cells that make up our immune system. And you can actually give a ratio depending on get a ratio for you depending on what your blood work shows. And they can correlate this. Now, for me, I thought this was super fascinating because I didn't really have any idea. All I knew is that I never get sick. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. I always looked and I'm like, why is it that I literally never get sick? I can't remember the last time that I missed a day of work due to being sick. I think it was probably COVID because I wasn't allowed to work, physically. But some people they're sick all the time. And you're like, how are you always sick? Like, it doesn't really matter regardless of what they do or don't do. Well, this showed me that my immune system was that of a 21-year-old. I'm not 21. I've been out of residency for 7-8 years now, to give you an idea. So I'm not anywhere close to 21 anymore. But that's a pretty cool thing that you can see, and you can always strive to improve that. That would be the intrinsic versus extrinsic type. But I thought that was pretty fascinating. Another thing that is probably the most famous type of way of checking your age per se is what we call your telomere. And that is the end of your chromosome. It's saying, are your ends shortening faster than they should be? Are they slower, meaning they're not shortening? Are they lengthening? Have you been able to lengthen yours? And there's a couple different things that we can actually use to lengthen. There's a couple peptides that can help. There's some different supplements that potentially could help. Now, I thought mine was fascinating because telomere length, the shorter the telomere, the faster you're going to die, quote unquote, at least from a DNA perspective. Now, there's a cool chart that basically shows like where yours is versus where everyone else is that they've charted. And they kind of correlate that with your age. Now, for me, it goes by kilo base pairs, or what we call base pairs. And mine was 7.4. Max, I think, is a little bit over 8. And my telomere length correlated with someone that was about 30 years old, which is pretty cool because I am not 30. I'm a little older, quite older than that. So that's cool. And that's something I want to continue to strive to lower, in whether it's hyperbaric chamber or, epitalon or, any of the quercetins and resveratrols and curcumins and methylene blue and all these cool different supplements and devices that we can use to optimize our aging. Eventually we'll talk about something called the clotho gene. We'll talk about NAD in different ways. We're going to do an NAD intracellular test that should be coming back pretty soon. So there's different cool things that we're going to check. Now, one of the last tests that we're going to talk about right now is something called the mitotic clock. Now, the mitotic clock basically tells you how many stem cell divisions happen per year for you, which is like, wait, what? So yeah, as you get older, your stem cell divisions end up dropping. So you really want your stem cell divisions to be low as possible, meaning you don't turn over as fast as you could. The longer you have your stem cells, the healthier you're going to be, the longer you're likely going to live. Now, this is an interesting thing because I never really thought of this, despite injecting stem cells in patients every day. But there is a way to check how yours are doing, and it basically tells you how quickly they are multiplying and dying, basically. So this is the mitotic clock. This is another way to check your aging, and this test really combines all of them. That's kind of why I like to use it. Now, this company has the ability to check your age level, or namely your fitness age level, just by blood work, correlating, hey, these people are this age and this type of fitness based on what we see within parameters. So I thought that was fascinating because you can correlate, high fit individuals, usually, which is a VO2 max test, a breathing test, that are 1.5 to 2 years younger than biological age. And if someone has a grip strength score, and you can see for every year that you're older on your clock, you're 0.3 lower on your grip strength score, and your BMI increases by 0.32. So there is a correlation there. And it kind of shows you some different markers. The specific ones this one uses is grip strength, VO2 max, gait speed, and FEV1. Now, obviously, it's not measuring you while you do that, but it kind of gives you a gauge based on parameters that it's used and it's discovered, which I thought was pretty fascinating. Now, one of the last sections I really want to talk about is something that I didn't really realize was possible, based on methylation and evaluating DNA. And there's a sequence of different CMPG sites, which is different sub-alleles within a gene called the PON3 gene, that actually, depending on your response to this gene, it will tell you if you have issues with weight loss secondary to this specific gene. So if basically saying, if you have this gene, if you're hypomethylated, which is what I happen to be, then you are a non-responder for a hypocaloric diet. So it basically correlates. You can starve yourself all you want. You're not going to lose weight because this gene doesn't allow you to. If you are a hypermethylator, you will lose weight if you starve yourself. Obviously, if you starve yourself long enough, you're going to lose weight. But I thought this was super fascinating because I didn't realize it was actually even possible. So this is, again, called the TruDiagnostic test. This is one of the different tests that I use for anti-aging. On average, it's about $450, I think, or $500, somewhere around there. There's two parts to it. There's the full test, and then there's kind of the smaller test. And you can check the full test the first time, ideally, and then if you want to do a follow-up just to kind of give your pacing, or Jonah gives a couple parts to it. And you can check it every 6 months or every year if you wanted to kind of get a gauge of, hey, where am I at? What baselines do I have? What things do I need to work on? And then you develop an anti-aging protocol, longevity protocol, trying different things, mixing in exercise, changing your diet, improving some supplementation, maybe doing some IVs, doing some different peptides, maybe getting in sauna or hyperbaric chamber or cold plunge, different things that can help with slowing down aging, if presumably that's what you want to do. So hopefully you found this video fascinating. Give me an idea if you liked it. Share this with your friends who maybe I haven't heard of this type of thing before. And if you're interested in this type of test, it's a simple blood test. All it is, they take a little bit of blood from one of your fingers, you put it on a little sheet, they mail it, you seal it up, and then you mail it off to them. And then within a couple weeks, they give you all this information back. And then most of the time, they'll walk you through it. Or you can have someone like myself walk you through it. So hopefully that was helpful. I will see you next week with another cool topic. Thank you. Take care.